Good morning, everyone. What we're going to be doing today is something I have never done before, and that is hopefully we'll be learning Yeshayahu together, and I'll have a chance to teach Yeshayahu and learn as well. What I wanted to do, though, because Yeshayahu is a very different kind of sefer than what we've done in the past, most of the other Sfarim we've learned are purely historical in nature. There's a story that goes from beginning to end. We have the characters. There can be some words of tochacha. There can be some poetry. The Nevi'im Achronim are different. And so I want to be able to give a little bit more of an in-depth introduction than I normally do, just so we get the context, and then we'll get into the parak itself. And so I prepared this handout. If you don't have the handout, I did send it. And I will pull it up on screen also for those who don't have it. So the basic line of Yeshayahu starts with the Gemara in Bava Batra. So the first thing we need to understand, the Gemara in Bava Batra, and this is the top of page 1. I didn't number the pages. I apologize. The lines I normally do. But at the top of page 1, you see right away that we put in context. This is the famous Gemara in Bava Batra that talks about the order of the Nevi'im. And there it says very simply that Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught Sidran Shel Nevi'im, the order of the Nevi'im themselves are Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, Malachim. We've learned all of those. Then Yirmiyah, Yechezkel, Yeshaya, Ushnei Masar, and the Trei Asar. So we have this order. Now it's interesting, when you look inside of our Tanachim, the order is a little bit different. And we have Yeshayahu first. Historically, Yeshayahu does come before the other two. Yeshayahu talks about, and we'll see it in a little bit, the latter stages of Sefer Melachim, not the end, but the latter stages. Yirmiyahu is more the Navi at the time of the destruction, and Yechezkel is more the Navi that's talking about the rebuilding already, and the Navi who exists within the Galut itself. So historically, the order is Yeshayahu, then Yirmiyahu, then Yechezkel, which is part of what the Abarbanel is trying to explain on this piece as well. And so the Abarbanel, if you notice, is the next block of text that I have. And in that next block of text, it says quite simply, Amar Yitzchak Asfaradi ben Hasar Adon Yehuda Abarbanel. So the Abarbanel introduces himself to us. Mizera Kodesh Mishpachat Beit David. And he's also from the sacred home of the Beit David. He viewed himself as a member of the Davidic dynasty. He was understood as. And so the Abarbanel says like this. He says, "B'sidran shel nevi'im matzanu ra'inu min hagam shel Yisrael b'chiluf ma she'amar amru Razal b'Bava Batra perakama." He said, in terms of the order of the Nevi'im, we find that the tradition of the Jewish people is that we switch the order from what's found within Bava Batra. Kisham amru sidran shel Nevi'im, because in Bava Batra it says the order of the Nevi'im are Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, Malachim, Yirmiyahu, Yechezkel, Yeshayahu, Trei Asar. V'natnu tam lama yakdimu Yirmiyahu v'Yechezkel v'Yeshayahu acharem. And they gave a reason why the order is not in chronological order, but we start with Yirmiyahu, then Yechezkel, and then Yeshayahu. Bomram, when they said, Chazal said, Shaya Sefer Melachim Sofa Churbana, because if you remember, the end of Melachim talks about the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash. Yirmiyahu Kulei Churbana. And Yirmiyahu is all about Churban, about the destruction. Remember, Yirmiyahu wrote Sefer Megillat Eicha as well. V'Yechezkel Reishe Churbana v'Sofe Nichamta, and Yechezkel begins with Churban and then talks about Nechama, about comfort. The Yeshayahu Kule Nechimta, and Yeshayahu is all about comfort. V'Samchina Churbana v'Nichamta, and therefore the way Chazal organized it was thematically. If we're going to end Malachim, the historical books, with Churban, with destruction, let's learn now one of the Nevi'im that talks about Churban. Then we'll talk about the Navi that talks about Churban transitions into comfort, into hope, salvation, and then we'll talk about Yeshayahu at the end. But he said, however, our forefathers who were in the diaspora didn't do this way. But rather, we have Yeshayahu first, then Yirmiyahu, then Yechezkel, then Treasar. And he says, if you look into it carefully, I see that this order that we have makes a lot of sense. And there are 5 reasons, says the Abarbanel in his introduction, why the order makes more sense to be Yeshayahu first. He says, the first reason is chronological. Chronologically, Yeshayahu comes first, and there's other 5 reasons which I'm going to give, and I only brought the first reason. Okay, the first reason, in other words, is that even though in the times of the Gemara they said it should be thematic, we organize our Tanachim chronologically. Okay, and if you notice, just Habchina Rishonan, this is the 4th paragraph on the page, the 3rd one under the Abarbanel, ultimately says that first reason, and I'm just going to skip over to the underlined section. If you notice, but we also have to understand is that these 3 books, in a sense, branch out from Sefer Malachim. It's real easy if you think about it for a moment. Malachim, 2nd Malachim, if you remember, is already the end of the Beit HaMikdash. Yirmiyahu lives there. He's warning them of what's going to happen, and happens at the end of the book. The end of the book is the time when Yirmiyahu lives and beyond. He tells them what is going on and tells them what's going to happen, describes what happens. So he's an extension. Yechezkel picks up on this and talks about the next stages. So if we look at what we've learned so far, Yoshua, Shoftim, Shmuel, and Malachim, this is the natural consequence of them, not only chronologically, but also in the sense of being connected to them in the same sense. That's the first piece, okay? Placement of Yeshayahu should come after Malachim. That's how we have it in our Tanachim. The next piece is also, just to point out, is just from the Radak. It's the bottom paragraph, the introduction of Radak. Okay, if you notice, we'll see that Yeshayahu was going to be prophesying in the time of Uziyahu, Yotam, Achaz, and Chizkiyahu, during those 4 kings. We also see that Hosea, one of the 12 prophets, also prophesies at the same time. Yehoshea, though, refers to the king of the north. And so while Hosea and Yeshayahu are operating at the same times, Hosea is the prophet of the north, Yeshayahu is going to be the prophet of the south. And then just continuing with the underline, and Chazal say that Yeshayahu began when Uziyahu was stricken with leprosy. The story, we'll see it inside. He went too far and tried to take on the role of being a Kohen, and God punished him, and he was stricken with leprosy. And that, according to Chazal, is when Yeshayahu started to prophesy. Because it says in the 6th chapter of Yeshayahu, it says in the year that Uziyahu died, and God is speaking, says, who should I send to be the one to warn the Jewish people? Yeshayahu volunteers, I am here to fulfill this job. In other words, what we're going to see, really, if I were arranging Sefer Yeshayahu in a chronological order, the first chapter of Yeshayahu should be what is chapter 6. Chapter 6 is the very first prophecy that we encounter with Yeshayahu historically. It's at the end of Uziyahu's reign, and Yeshayahu pops in there. But we don't start there. We have 5 prakim before. starting from Perek Aleph, obviously, which we're going to start today. It's out of chronological order, and he says, so it's possible he even began earlier, the time of beginning of Uziyahu, because it also says in Divrei Yamim, V'yeter Divrei Uziyahu Rishonim, V'achronei Maloim Ketuvim B'Sefer Asher Katav Yeshayahu ben Amoz Hanavi. Because in Yeshayahu it says the items that are about Uziyahu, both from the beginning and the end, are found in a book from Yeshayahu. Now, we don't know if that's literally the book of prophecies that we're going to read, or maybe one other ancient book. According to but it was only in that last year of Uziyahu that he actually saw that vision that caused him to be shocked. Now, if I look on the next page, and on the next page it looks like this, I just want to give you a little bit of a historical piece. Okay, the first pasuk we're going to see inside in a minute, but the first pasuk is Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amoz Asher Chazal Yudav Yerushalayim. This is the prophecy of Yeshayahu, the son of Amoz, who prophesied for Yudah and Yerushalayim in the days of Uziyahu, Yotam, Achaz, Yechizkiyahu, Malchei Yudah, in the time of these four kings. So what I did is I just gave you one of the many theories of the exact years of the kings. There's a number of different ones. Interestingly, Chaim Angel, which we have on the next page, Chaim Angel is a wonderful contemporary scholar of Tanakh, uses these dates. In his book, I'm not really sure why he prefers them. They belong to Professor Gershon Galil, but from Haifa University, but these are the ones he's doing it. So if you look on the right side, the chart, you'll see those four kings, Uziyahu, Yotam, Achaz, and Chizkiyahu. And so we're talking about, at this point, the mid-8th century BCE. Remember, the Beit HaMikdash is destroyed in 586. The northern tribes are exiled in 721. Okay, so if you look, Yeshayahu is going to be prophesying during the last stages of the northern kingdom of the 10 tribes. He starts at the same time he's in power is Yeravam Hasheni, is the second Yeravam. The first Yeravam was the one who broke off with Rechavam, the initial division of the two tribes right after King Solomon. And so Yeravam Hasheni is in power. He starts at 790 to 750. And then if you look, you have all of a succession of kings, and I'm on the left side of the page, a succession of kings who generally rule for a relatively brief period of time. Okay, the most you'll have after Yeravam Hasheni is 11 years. If I'm doing, is not 11 years, is 41 years, 39 years of Menachem. But most of the others are very brief reigns. Now, again, one of the interesting things is when you have a king who has a very long reign, it means there must be some stability within the nation, within the kingdom. Yeah.
Your table shows you Yeravam Hasheni after Chizkiyahu.
Yeravam, no, it's just you have to look at the dates.
They're not the same.
In other words, it's not a timeline. It's not a timeline. It's a chart. I'm sorry. So Yeravam Hasheni starts in 790 BCE, according to this. Same time about as Uziyahu starts in 788 BCE. Yeravam Hasheni, if you notice in this chart, he's going to reign for about 52 years. Oh, I'm sorry, Uziyahu is 52 years, Yeravam is 40 years. We have to assume that there's certain stabilities, therefore, of government, and that's just one more thing to do. But again, the main point that I show on these two, and again, it's not a timeline, it's just a chart. We're watching a prophet of the south who is going to be observing what happens in the north, the exile of the 10 tribes. He's going to see what happens up there. He's going to be using that as reference to the people in the south. Message is pretty easy. Most of us can figure this out now with the hindsight of history. And that is, if you're not careful, look what happened to them. Okay. Now, I have summarized a big section of Yeshayahu, but we'll still learn that inside. If you go to the next page, this is just a piece from Chaim Angel. Chaim Angel has a wonderful book called Vision from the Prophet and Counsel from the Elders. It is basically a survey book of all of Tanakh. It's a book, it's a beautiful work that he put together, and he talks about a lot of this, but if the second paragraph in English, which is also important to realize, the success of this period has prompted some scholars to refer to it as the biblical Silver Age, second only to the golden age of David and Solomon. In other words, Uzziah's reign is a really good time initially for what was going on in the Jewish people. There's a lot of positive things happening. Now, however, by the time of the end, and if you look at the bottom of the page, Rashi and Bava Batra points out that ultimately it says Chizkiyahu v'siato, that when it comes to the book of Yeshayahu, Chizkiyahu and those people who worked with him, B'nai Dorosh, Arichu Yamim Acharav, explains Rashi, were around for a long time, Katvu Yeshayahu, who they wrote Yeshayahu. Why? Menashe kills Yeshayahu. Yeshayahu is a prophet that's going to be murdered. He didn't get around to writing his book because the Nevi'im, when they wrote their books, they would write them while they're alive. It's a little hard after he's been murdered to be able to write it. Okay, now, having done all of that, okay, we're still doing pretty good. Now it's going to get a little heavy for a moment, but I'm going to do it really quickly. If you look at the next pages, we're not going to read most of it. I color-coded it and I bolded it. And the reason I did so is in order to remember the history of what we're going to be dealing in Yeshayahu, what we really need to do is we really need to learn a lot of chapters in Divrei Hayamim or in Sefer Malachim. Divrei Hayamim in this era is a little bit more explicit than some of the pieces. And so we're going to very quickly, and the fastest we've ever done it, is just review in Divrei Hayamim Bet from chapters 26 and up to 32. It shouldn't take more than 5-10 minutes. And I'll tell you why. Because if you notice at the top of page 4, I have some bolded words. And the bolded words talk about very simply that Uzziyahu, who began to rule at 16, he ruled for 52 years. Don't forget about that. The green lines all talk about the wonderful things he did, as in green is go. Did a lot of good stuff. And in fact, the bold line in green, Uviyamei darsho et Hashem hitzlicho Elokim. And when he was seeking out God, he was very successful. And then you see all the things he was successful with. Now, part of the success was that Aram, who had been the great antagonists of the Jewish people and had caused such terrible things of them, were going to be attacked by Ashur. So during this point, historically, Aram, the Arameans, who had always been attacking the Jews and been really miserable, and so focus was constantly on a defense posture, they're going to be distracted by the Assyrian Empire that's rising up at this time, and the Assyrians are going to attack Aram, and Aram is going to generally leave the Jews alone. And so there's an opportunity for tremendous growth. And if some of you may even remember from Pasuk Tet, when I was growing up, it was an old song of Vayiven Uzziyahu Migdalim Yerushalayim. Okay, Uzziyahu built fortresses in Yerushalayim. We see all of these things, all those wonderful things. However, in Pasuk Tet Zayin, now we go to the red lines. Kato Gaval Libo. Ad lahashchit, and when he got really powerful, then he became haughty. And what happened was, Vayim alva Hashem Elokav vayavo elechal Hashem lahaktir al mizbeach haktoret, and he decided that he's going to offer the incense in the Beit Hamikdash. And the Kohanim try to stop him. They're not able to stop him. Why are you doing? And he went ahead and he reached, okay, and he has this Pasuk Yutet, he has in his hands the Ketoret, the incense offering, and ultimately he develops leprosy, Sarat. That's Pasuk Yutet. When he develops Sarat, he has to be then placed in isolation, and unfortunately, he was put away for Pasuk Chaf Aleph, and he's put away in this place. Vayuziyahu Amelech Mitzora ad Yom Moto Vayeshev Beit HaChofshit Mitzora Ki Nigzar Mi Beit Hashem V'Yotam Beno Al Beit HaMelech Shofet Ad Al Amaharetz. And instead, his son Yotam takes over. Yotam takes over for a protracted period of time where Uzziyahu was out of commission because he's been placed in isolation. Now, Yotam, if you look in the next, continuing in Perek Chav Zayin and Pasuk Bet and the bold words, "Vay Yaseh Yashar B'nei Hashem K'chol Asher Asa Uzziyahu Aviv Rak Lo Va'al Hechal Hashem V'Od Ha'am Mashchitim." Okay, he learned the lesson from his father. He didn't go into the Beit HaMikdash. I'm not going to do that one, but the people are not doing so great. And ultimately, he rules for 16 years. On the next page, along comes Achaz, the next king. And he's going to rule for 16 years. V'lo asa, in red, if you look at the top line, page 5, V'lo asa yashar b'nei Hashem keDavid aviv. He didn't do what was right. Vayelech b'darchei malchei Yisrael. V'gam masechot asa lebalim. He began to follow in the ways of the Malchei Yisrael. Now, if you just look at the years for a moment, okay, you look at the years going back a couple of pages, Achaz ruled from 742 until 726. What's happening in those years, 742 to 726, what's happening in those years are the final years before the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, before the destruction of the 10 tribes in the north. And he goes ahead and he assumes the posture of those tribes up there, which is pretty bad. And so if you look in Pasuk Hey, Vayitneu Hashem Elokav biyad hamelech Aram, Vayakuvo vayishbu mimeno shivya gdola vayaviu darmasek v'gam biyad melech Yisrael nitan vayach bo makah gdola. And as a result, what happens to Achaz is taken captive by Aram, the Arameans, the enemy of that era. They take him, they bring him up to Damascus, and at the same time, while that's happening to him, the northern tribes are attacking the southern tribes. Not a good period of time for the Jews. And if you look down in the middle of the page, it's more bold. And then he makes this horrific decision, which is one we've seen before. He turns to the enemy's enemy and assumes that the enemy's enemy is an ally. So he turns to the Assyrians and he says, Assyrians, help me. And now all of a sudden, all the other nations around, the Adumim, and also you have the Plishtim, they're all starting up. And then at the end, Vayishkav Achaz im avotav v'yikberu v'Yerushalayim ki lo hevi'u l'kivrei malchei Yisrael v'yimloch Yechizkiyahu b'no tachtav. And he was buried in Yerushalayim when he died, but he didn't have the full royal treatment. He wasn't buried in the royal caves. Then we come to the last of the kings who are going to rule during the time of Yeshayahu, and that's Chizkiyahu HaMelech. He is going to rule, if you look towards the bottom of page 5, the bold lines, V'esrim v'teisha shana malach b'Yerushalayim. He's 29 years. Vayas hayashar b'nei Hashem kol asher asa David aviv. And comparing Chizkiyahu to David, he did really good. Okay, and then, if you remember, they begin fixing up the Beit HaMikdash. The next page, already on page 6, page 6, Vayavo Penima El Chizkiyahu HaMelech Vayomer Tiharnu et Beit Hashem et Mizbach HaOlav et Kol Kelav et HaShulchan HaMarechet et Kol Kelav. And they tell Chizkiyahu, we have purified everything. This is almost like a Hanukkah kind of story. We purified the et Kol HaKelim Asher Izniach HaMelech Achaz B'malchuto B'ma'alo Hichinu V'Ikdashnu V'Hinam Lifnei Mizbach Hashem. And everything that had been defiled by Achaz, we've taken care of right now. So when that happens, at the bottom of the page in Perek Lamed, Vayishlach Yechizkiyahu Kol Yisrael v'Yehuda v'gam Igro Katav al Ephraim u'Menashe Lavo leVeit Hashem b'Yerushalayim Aso Pesach LaHashem Elokei Yisrael. And Chizkiyahu purifies the house. He wants to create this massive gathering. Notice who he invites to it for this Pesach. He doesn't just invite the people from the south. He even invites the people from the north, and he even invites Menashe and Ephraim to this. Now, if you look when Chizkiyahu was king from 726 to 697. So it's the last years of the northern kingdom. And they're doing the Korban Pesach second month because they couldn't do it in the first month, in the month of Iyar. Okay, and if you look at the next page, Pasuk Chavav, when we talk about, there's a whole description of what happens, but ultimately Pasuk Chavav, it's the middle of the page in bold. V'tisimcha gdola b'Yerushalayim ki mimei Shlomo ben David Melech Yisrael lo kazo b'Yerushalayim. There was this enormous celebration over this Pesach. This was a rededication in many ways of the Beit HaMikdash, reunification of so many people. Chizkiyahu was among the greatest of kings that we had. Then comes, okay, if you look on the next page, we are now on page 8, and as I told you, it was going to be a quick review of these Sfarim. Vayas kazot Chizkiyahu b'chol Yehuda vayas hatov vayashar v'emet lifnei Hashem Elokav, and he went ahead and he did all the goodnesses. V'chol ma'aseh asher echel b'avodat beit Elokim v'torah mitzvot lidrosh Elokav v'chol levavo asav v'yitzliach, and everything that he did in the Beit HaMikdash and everything he did to seek out God and with all of his heart, he did. He was successful in it. Perek Lamed Bet, the final perek of what happens here. Achar zeh shalach Sancherev melech Ashur avadav Yerushalayim v'hu al Lachish v'chol mamshalto imo al Yechizkiyahu melech Yehuda v'al kol Yehuda asher b'Yerushalayim lemor. If you remember, Sancherev, who had exiled the north, tries to attack the south. He attacks, but at that point, Pasuk Chav, vayitpalel Yechizkiyahu hamelech v'Yeshayahu v'Amotz hanavi al zot vayezaku hashamayim. And he brings Yeshayahu, his prophet, in, and they pray up to the heavens. Vayishlach Hashem malach vayechached kol gibor chayil v'nagid v'sar v'machaneh melech Ashur v'yashu b'voshe panim la'artzo v'yavo beit Elokav v'u mitzi'ei me'av sam hipilu b'charev. And they try, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu saves the Jewish people. Vayosha Hashem et Yechizkiyahu ve'et yoshvei Yerushalayim miyad Sancherev melech Ashur miyad kol. And everyone is saved. V'yeter divrei pasuk lamed bet divrei Yechizkiyahu v'chasadav v'nei ktuvim b'chazon Yeshayahu ben Amotz hanavi al sefer malchei Yehuda v'Yisrael, and all the rest of Yechizkiyahu's stories are going to be written in Sefer Yeshayahu, or in other books that Yeshayahu may have had a hand in. But remember, Yeshayahu was written by Chizkiyahu and his people according to the Gemara. So we see in this era, we see that it starts out. Uziyahu's top of the world sinks down. Then after Uziyahu comes along comes his son. He learns the message, but the people haven't fully learned what's going to happen. And so there's still a problem with Yotam. Then we have, unfortunately, Achaz, who blows it. And then Chizkiyahu is back on top of the world. And this is the context for this Sefer of Sefer Yeshayahu. It's if you want, you can obviously spend more time on the psukim, but I didn't want to be learning Divrei Yomim with you. I want to learn Sefer Yeshayahu. So now let's get into the book of Yeshayahu. Now, Yeshayahu in the first perek has a number of different pieces. The first pasuk just sets the stage. In Ivrit, it's called the Ketovet, the address. Okay. Then we have another 4 psukim that are going to be giving a general prophecy. The interesting question is, this is that prophecy that apparently is out of order. And the question is, why is this opening piece going to be out of order in this? And one of the answers, and this is the Abarbanel suggests this, that these words that Yeshayahu is going to say, both in this perek and also in the next 4 parakim up till perek Vav, were common messages that he said over and over again. So if you want to know the basic theme of Yeshayahu, learn the first 5 parakim, because they're going to be repeated over and over again. And then, according to the Abarbanel, then we turn to the chronological first perek, his first prophecy itself. Chazon Yeshayahu ben Amotz asher chazal Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. So this is the prophecy of Yeshayahu ben Amotz. Now, Yeshayahu ben Amotz, whenever we know that a prophet is identified as the son of a prophet, the Gemara tells us that this is, his father was also a prophet. We also know, based on the Gemara in Megillah, we are taught that Amotz and Amatzia were brothers. Now, if Amotz and Amatzia are brothers, you can go back to your little charts, okay? If Amotz and Amatzia are brothers, then what that means for us is that Yeshayahu Hanavi was first cousins to Uziyahu the king. Yeshayahu comes from a royal background. His uncle was the king. Now his first cousin is going to be the king, first cousin Uziyahu. So that is why Amotz is also important. Not just that he was a Navi, but Amotz, Amatzia, again, Achim Hayu, they were brothers. Asher Chazal Yehuda v'Yerushalayim. Well, we did a piece of this, okay? And the main thing is that we need to understand that this is a prophet, that his prophecies focus primarily on the south. There are going to be references to other nations, and there are going to be references to the north, but whenever Yeshayahu is going to be talking about something else, ultimately his motive for it is for the people of the south to learn. He's on Yehudah and he's on Yerushalayim. Interestingly, if he's on Yehudah, on the area of Yehudah, isn't he also on the area of Yerushalayim? So why do I say, it's like saying these are the laws that apply to the United States and the state of Illinois. Now, I think most often than not, the state of Illinois is still part of the United States. So why would it say these are the prophecies of Yehudah and Yerushalayim? And so on that, the Dat Mikra has an interesting comment. He says very simply that while it's true that the prophecy was about the southern kingdom always, there is a tremendous amount of focus, and ultimately the goal is the salvation of Yerushalayim. So it's setting both to whom the audience was, Yehudah, and the focus at the end of the day is going to be Yerushalayim in the message. And it happened, B'mei Yotam, Achaz Yechizkiyahu Malchei Yehudah. And all of this happened in the time of these kings. Okay, we know the time frame, we know the general focus, we know who's talking, we're set. Now let's get into the initial prophecy. This is the initial prophecy, not the first prophecy, the initial prophecy though of the book. Shimush Shamayim Va'azini Eretz. Now Shimush Shamayim Va'azini Eretz should remind us of something in Chumash.
Yeah.
Okay, good, I'm glad. Hazinu.
Moshe Rabbeinu.
Okay,
Moshe Rabbeinu.
Moshe Rabbeinu, it's the Parshat Hazinu, right? Now, when I call upon the heavens and the world and the earth to testify to something, what's the reason I'm calling upon them?
Because they are eternal.
Eternal. Good. What's the connection? The Ibn Ezra says that this is what Yeshayahu is trying to do is he's trying to remind us of Parshat Hazinu, but he's trying to remind us of Parshat Hazinu because he wants to say what's happening now is connected to what Moshe Rabbeinu said, that we're not living in an era that hasn't been something that was foretold in the Torah, both in terms of good and in terms of bad, that if we don't do the right thing, Abed Tabdun, we're going to be destroyed. If we do the right thing, we'll be in good place. And as a result, he's calling on our memories. He's trying to jog these words are coming to us as well. But the Nefesh HaChaim actually suggests that there's one more piece to it. When I call on heaven and earth, I'm not just saying that this is something eternal, but I'm saying that this is something, what I'm going to say has an impact on the entire universe. This is not something, I'm speaking to you, Dan Yerushalayim, but this is something much bigger. What we're going to be dealing with is the future of the world. And that's why I talk to the heavens and the earth and this kind of piece. Now, if you look, Ki Hashem Diber, because God is speaking. Now, Ki Hashem Diber is ultimately the way Yeshayahu says, okay, this is not me talking. I'm now talking with God's voice. Ki Hashem Diber. Okay, the Mitzudot says, Lo me'elai ani omer ki devar Hashem befi. It's not my words, these are God's words I'm going to give to you. Rashi says, actually, keep me Hashem Diber, just basically says that, no, God said this. Now, the difference between the two ways of saying it is, Ki Hashem Diber, the following is going to be God's words, talking about the next thing coming up. According to Rashi, God said this, it's talking about the past. In other words, everything you're going to hear from me are things that God has told you already. I'm not saying anything new. Maybe I'm saying it in a different way, but I'm not saying anything new. And then God begins the prophecy. Banim Gidalti, I have raised children, or I have reared children, Viromamti, and I have raised them up. Now, Banim, says the Abarbanel, is in plural. Why is it in plural? The Abarbanel says this is referring to both Malchut Yisrael and Malchut Yehudah. It's referring to both of the monarchies. Okay, but if you look at it, the Dat Mikra says there's something more important here. Banim Gidalti Viromamti. It's one thing to rear children. It's another thing to raise them up. I've given them the opportunity to stand on their own in this sense. Okay. And what happens is when I established that I reared a child, I gave him all of that. What would be the natural consequence of relationship that you would normally assume in the world? The normal relationship you would want to assume, the Malbim says, it's normally children have a sense of gratitude. Generally, not always, but generally, you did everything for the kid. You made him into who or she is, he or she is. There should be a sense of gratitude. And yet, what is the consequence? Vahem pashubi. They sin against me, nevertheless. Despite the fact that they should be grateful, gidalti v'romamti is the key word there. It's not working. Now, he says then, Yadash shor koneu. Now, the ox knows who owns him. V'chamor evus ba'alav. And the donkey even knows who's giving him food. Evus is the trough where the donkey would feed. Yisrael lo yadami lo hitponan. And then we got the Jews. Okay, the donkey, the ox knows, the donkey knows, and the Jews lo hitponan. Now, yeah, just a couple of things that if you notice, these two animals are also significant in these two animals. Okay, an ox. Okay, what's significant of an ox? An ox isn't an ox is a working animal, right? It pulls. You normally don't think of an ox as someone who has a lot of thought to him. When I start talking about a chamor, normally when I talk about a chamor, I really think about something else, a little bit less than an ox in terms of intellect itself, no matter what the reality is. That's normally the imagery I have. And with all of that, those two, and I know there's somebody out there from some animal rights organization who's going to get insulted, but those two dumb animals get it, and you Jews don't, which is the basic message of the pasuk. There are other pieces, okay, that ultimately, if you look at it, the chamor is going to the trough. Why does a chamor go to a trough? It's for its own benefit, right? To eat, it's going to have its own benefit. So even a donkey knows you might want to do something that's for your own good. The Jews, they don't get it. They just don't get it. And ultimately, because they don't get it, we're going to see what happens. They're behaving even less than the animals is the piece. Okay. What hoy goy chote am keved avon. And so now he gives the word hoy. Now, hoy is always a word that is like starting out a call. It's milat kriya. It's calling to something. Best translation of the word hoy in this case is oi. Okay, it's just, oh my God. There are three things actually that the Navi is using this word for. And this is according to the Dat Mikra. He's using it for a sense of shock. I can't believe it. He's using it out of pain because these are their children. God did all the good things for him. And at the very same time, he's saying, watch out. There's a threat. There is a warning that's going to be present. All in that one word, hoy. Goy chotem. Now, there's a fascinating commentary. It's published now by Feldheim, by the son of Reb Shamshon Raphael Hirsch, Julius Hirsch, wrote a commentary on Sefer Yeshayahu following the style of his father. Julius Hirsch went ahead and he says, Goy Choteh. Why does it say Goy Choteh? And I think I saw it also in one of the Rishonim. Why a nation of sinners? Why would it say a nation of sinners? Because normally we talk about the Jews as being a Goy Kadosh. We're a sacred nation. When I go ahead and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you're redefining yourselves. Remember, the word in Tanakh, Goy, does not refer to a non-Jew. It refers to a nation, and more often than not, the Jewish nation. So when someone refers to somebody as a Goy, okay, that's modern usage. We would use it in classical Tanakh, it would be a Nochri. Okay, it would be Amzar. Okay, it would be something of that nature. Okay, Aloes, something of that, but it wouldn't be a Goy. So here we're taking this word that normally is the great defining word of the Jewish people, a Goy Kadosh. We're saying now you're the Goy Chotem. Am keved avon. You're a people who have so many sins associated with you. You're heavy with sin. Zera miraim. And you are either Zera miraim. There's two possibilities of how to look at this. Zera means the offspring, the seed of miraim, of those who do evil. The Dat Mikra says you're from a family of evildoers. Zera is mishpacha. According to the Ibn Ezra, he says, no, you are the offspring of Rishaim. Banim mashchitim, you are sons who are destroying things. Now, why sons who are destroyers? Because remember, Banim gidalti veromamti, instead of being the sons who I've reared and raised up, who should have a sense of hakarat tov, of gratitude, you're the banim mashchitim. You're the sons who are destroying things. Azvu et Hashem, they have left God. Niatzu et Kedosh Yisrael, and they have angered Kedosh Yisrael. Now, Kedosh Yisrael is the terminology for God. But why would we refer to God as Kedosh Yisrael? Why don't we say Niatzu et Elokav or Niatzu et Hashem? Why are we saying he angered the Kedosh Yisrael? Well, we will see that that's a possibility. Actually, it's going to be rejected by a number of the Meforshim. What's interesting, and we'll see this, I don't think we're going to see it this week, we'll see it the next time. The complaints here, according to many of the Meforshim, are focused almost exclusively on behaviors that are between individuals, are more ben adam lechavero to ben adam lemakom violations. Yeah.
So then is Niatzu Kedosh Yisrael like explaining what Mashkitim is?
Well, because it's poetic, there's a lot of pieces. You've angered God, but the real issue here is Kedosh Yisrael doesn't have the word God in it, right?
It's like sacred values of Israel.
It's the sacred, the sanctity of Israel. Probably, I don't know how Art Scroll translates that phrase, the Kedosh Yisrael, the Holy One of Israel. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But if you think about what it really means, Kedosh Yisrael, it's more the sanctity of Israel, who is God. In other words, what you've done is you've angered the one person who's on your team. God is what made you so great, the Kedosh Yisrael, and you've angered him. Nazoru Achor. Now, Nazoru Achor means that you're estranged. From the word Zor is one possibility. There's a number of different. Radak says the nifal from the shorish of Zion Vav Resh. You've moved back. You have not reverted. You have
It says turned away.
huh?
It says
Turned away, huh?
back.
Turned away backward. There's a bet regressed. Okay, was the word I was looking for. All of these things. Now, if you look at these phrases. Again, and when a Navi is speaking, and I'm probably going to give this mashal many times to come. One of my favorite examples of style sometimes of the Tochacha comes from the Wizard of Oz. Okay, the Wizard of Oz, if you remember, in the forest, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, right? Now, where's the verb? Lions and tigers and bears. I'm scared of them. They're going to devour me. They're going to do something. In other words, you're able to portray an emotion by a rapid sense, a rapid repetition of words, a rapid statement of words, lions and tigers and bears. Right? Here, if you look at this, okay, Am kavedabon, zeramerim, banim mashchitim, azvu et Hashem, niatzu et Kedosh Yisrael, nazoru achor.
Oh my.
Oh my, yeah, definitely an oh my. Okay, nowhere does it say you are this, but it just gives this rapid repetition of sins, and it builds up this feeling. Yeah. His intention is to wake them up. Okay, his intention is to wake them up. Ultimately, his intention is for them to do tshuva. He's not coming to say you are eternally damned. There's nothing you can do anymore. But recognize who and what you are. Now, if I remember, this is happening, this nevuah, again, according to the Ibn Ezra, is occurring through all of the years. But let's just take Yeshayahu for a minute. this is happening at the end of the years of Uziyahu. Okay, this is, when he's prophesying, it's somewhere between Uziyahu. Some suggest actually this is already at the end of the days of Chizkiyahu, where things are not so good anymore. Okay, it could be a number of different times, but this is a period of time where he just wants to make sure that they wake up from what they're doing. Almed tuku od tosifu sarah. Almed tuku od tosifu sarah. Who wants to read for me the translation in Art Scroll?
They have forsaken Hashem.
For what have you been smitten?
What have you been smitten? Almed tuku. How does it go?
Each had the smitten with sickness, each heart with.
No, od tosifu. There's tos. Since you continued good. Since you continued what? To act perversely. Since you have continued to act perversely. There is a machloket between Rashi and the Vilna Gaon on where the comma belongs. According to the Art Scroll translation, okay, take it one more time. Someone that up till perversely.
Okay, for what have you been smitten since you continue to act perversely?
For what have
There's
you
a
been
question
smitten?
mark. Act perversely.
Where
There's
is
a question mark.
no Almed tuku
Act
od
smitten.
and
You're smitten.
may I borrow your thing for a second? Okay, I want to make sure I hear it right. Okay, he says 5. Okay. For what have you been smitten? Since you continue to act perversely. Okay. For what have you been smitten since you act perversely? Now look in the Hebrew and tell me where the comma goes. That's the phrase al matuku otosifu sarah. After tuku. Almed tuku. No, you're looking at the trup. Okay, forget the trup for a minute. Forget the trup. Almed, that's a tvir. Almed tuku. Since you have acted perversely, otosifu sarah. Right? That's so that's the machloket. Rashi's explanation is the way Art Scroll translates. Art Scroll is pretty good. Generally, Art Scroll follows Rashi's commentary when there's a machloket. Okay, and I hadn't seen it in Art Scroll, but I kind of guessed it would be the same thing because they're pretty consistent on it. So the way you would punctuate it, Almed tuku, o tosifu sarah. The Vilna Gaon says no. Where it should be punctuated is Almed tuku od. Where can I hit you more? In other words, you've been totally smashed. There's not a place on your body where I can even get to you anymore that hasn't already suffered. And then,
which is consistent with the next pasuk of En bo mitom.
Right? Now, Almed tuku, and it's also the Vilna Gaon is consistent with the trup. If you look, okay, it's a munach, mercha, tvir, tipcha. Okay, in other words, that the under the ayin that looks like a comma that closes the phrase which began with the meh. Okay, those two notes that look like this is like a closing phrase. So there's a machloket how to explain it. Okay, according to the Vilna Gaon, I have no place else to punish you. You've been hit so hard, so many places. There's nothing left to do. Why would you continue to sin? Okay, according to Rashi, okay, I've hit you and yet you still continue. Yeah.
If this is the time of Yeshayahu, they would have been great. That's what you said. 52 years, it's great. Then they had his son Yotam, who he was doing okay, but actually the word Mashitin did appear there when you read.
Right. And remember, this is if it's at the end of the days when he started his nevuot. Okay, Perik Vav.
They get
So remember, so if you look at the prakim about Achaz, about Yotam ben Uziyahu, you'll see that he's doing bad. And his reign, he was the regent while his father was in isolation. So it could be there, it could be at a later time, right? All sorts of problems could have been. But here we're seeing the extent. Whereas the Navi is saying, Kol Rosh L'choli V'chol Levav Dabai. He says, it hurts me to hurt you so much. Every head is already every head is already sick. In other words, everybody's from, and every heart is sick as well. Rosh l'choli v'chol levav davai. The Radak says, okay, that ultimately, this is a reference to what's going to happen, what we talked about in the Tochacha back in Tvarim. What is it? V'kashem b'shigaon, v'varon b'timaon levav. Okay, that we're going to go ahead and God is going to, the head, shigaon, okay, timon levav, our hearts, God is, he's striking them. Okay, God, there's, how much more do you want? Mikaf regel, pasuk vav, mikaf regel, the ad rosh, ein bo matom. From feet to the head, there's not a matom. Now, matom, Rav Schwab, who also gave Shearim on, Rav Shimon Schwab gave Shearim on Yeshayahu, also it's been published. Rav Shimon Schwab Shearim that were published, he says that actually matom is a contraction of makom tam. Now, I don't know if grammatically it's a contraction, but there is no place that is without wounds. You are completely hit. Not only that, petza v'chabura makatria, what you're hit it with is a petza. A petza, says Rashi, is a wound from a sore, an open wound, okay? And the Mitzudat Zion says it's still bleeding. Chabura is a contusion where blood has come under, where you've been hit but not bleeding. Makatria, according to Mitzudat Zion, is talking about an oozing wound. Okay, that can't be done anything. It needs something. It's infected. Lo zoru velo chubashu velo rukacha vashem. And those wounds have not had zoru. That's how they would put the powder. They would sprinkle powder on to heal, but no healing. They haven't been bandaged, and they haven't been in any way smoothed with oil, softened with oil. All of these things, in other words, he's saying you're suffering from all of these punishments. Nothing is being done to address the wounds. Nothing is being done. Rashi says, okay, that you haven't softened. Not only have the wounds not been softened, but you haven't softened to do tshuva. The Abarbanel says, what are the three things? Lo zoru, you didn't do vidui, you haven't admitted to your sins. Lo chushu, you haven't done charata, you haven't regretted them. Lo rukacha, you haven't accepted anything about a change in behavior at all. Artzachem shemama, your land is desolate. Okay. Now, the Mitzudat David points out that this isn't the current situation, but rather this is what will happen. Okay. Your land, if you continue in this past, now, by the way, Artzachem Shemama, it makes it sound like it's present tense. Remember, in biblical Hebrew, and we're going to end with this pasuk on this happy note, and maybe I'll throw two more in real quickly. We'll just finish the section. But if you continue in this way, the reality is that your land will be desolate. There's a machloket. Is it going to be desolate from people, or is it going to be desolate as a land? Surufot eish, they've been consumed by fire. To your face, your strangers, your enemies are eating the produce, and they're leaving it desolate like only strangers would do. A stranger, when a conqueror conquers a land, he takes all of the spoils, doesn't care what happens, just leaves it. Versus someone else who's going to live there will care about what's left. I'm just going to read these two psukim. We may go back to them again. And the Bat Sion remains like a hut in the vineyard. The watchmen would have huts. It's very temporary, very, very much. It can fall down easily. It's like the sleeping area, again, another kind of hut, which was in the cucumber fields. Okay, kishuin. Okay, ke'ir nitzura, like a city that has been placed under siege. Lulei Hashem tzvakoto tir lanu sarid kim'at. If God had not left for us, at least some tzaddikim, somebody was left there to be able to redeem the situation after all of these destructions. Kisdom ayinu, we would be completely destroyed like Sodom. La'amorah daminu, we would be just like Amorah. I'm going to redo these two psukim because I didn't do them full justice. But what you see right now, this is the opening nevuah of Yirmiyahu. The opening of Yeshayahu, I'm sorry, the opening Nevuah of Yeshayahu is very simply, you have not shown the gratitude, recognize all that you had, you have turned away. This can be the consequence if you don't change your habits, if you don't do tshuva. We'll see some more within it later. Next week, there's no shir. In 2 weeks, we'll resume and we will finish at that time Perek Aleph.
In the time of Yeshayahu and Yotam, the Jewish people were saved from the enemies. You were describing the situation of
Yeah.
Abraham. The time of Ahaz, who was a bad guy. Couldn't this have been said in the time of Ahaz?
It could have been said, according to the Ibn Ezra, according to the Abarbanel, it was said in all of the times. And there could have been different times when it was said. We don't know when this nevuah happened. It could have been done in one of the times, but this is a general theme. It could have been done in all of the times. Saying it's done in all the times also resolves one other problem. Why open with it? Okay, why pick this to start with? Okay, I will see everybody and